All right, so now let's see examples for each of the logical operators for this negation, conjunction, and disjunction. Now let's first of all consider negation. All right, and let's consider this program here, and this part here is just for those of you who are not sure about the truth table just yet. However, whenever you're trying to trace the program, you should really try to see if you can do it without having to reference the truth table. But I'll include it just for now, since you're still beginning to learn. All right, so this will be the program we're going to consider. It's again our circle calculation for negation. So now I declare some Boolean variable over here. You can see this will be the first time we see some declaration here, right? Let me just highlight it for you. Over here, you can see Boolean over here. Again, to remind you, this is actually a data type. And we are declaring its positive to be a Boolean variable, meaning that we can only store either true or false into this particular variable. So now, on the right-hand side over here, we're putting some expression over here. And this one is easy. It's simply a relational expression. So this is a relational expression. Meaning that it's going to evaluate to a Boolean value. Well, either true or false, right? So for the first one, I'd like to clarify that with you. All right. So now the right-hand side, the radius depending on what the user actually enter, right? So we are reading the input over here from the user. You can see the radius is simply assigned to whatever the double number that's the user actually enter. All right. So that's a setup, and then so now in order to write a program, we are trying to do some error handling. Basically, we are saying that if it is not the case that it's positive, then we're gonna do some error handle, because the radius value for circle should be either 0 or positive. We are saying that if let me say it again. Let's say we just want the radius value to be strictly positive only if this holds that we consider that the radius value for the input is actually valid. Okay, so now if it is not the case that it is valid, in that case we're going to print out some error. Otherwise, so now we're doing selective action. Otherwise, we're going to print out the area, because now it's guaranteed the actually circle value is actually the radius value is actually positive. There's something very important I want to highlight to you over here. You can see this branching condition over here. You can see we say not is positive, right, over here, right? So now you want to think about what does the else part really mean, right? So as we illustrated previously, you only get to the else part if all the previous branching condition actually evaluate to false. So now you want to think about what does it really mean when I say not is positive is actually evaluate to false. What does that really mean? If this actually evaluate to false, so this will actually mean the opposite must be true, right? If something is actually false, then that means the opposite of something should be true. So that means if the opposite, so whenever you want to flip, you want to get the opposite of something, right? You want to say the opposite, let me just say this. So the opposite would be to get the negation of this original expression is positive, will actually evaluates to true. Right? What I'm trying to say over here is, I know that if I really get to the else branch, so that means is positive, not is positive, which is a branching condition over here, according to the meaning for the if statement must be false. So now, if something is simply false, so that means its opposite should be true. How do I get the opposite of this? I will simply say something over here, and then put in negation. And then, this part over here can be simplified by using the double negation rule. We'll talk about logical laws for the operators next week. For this week, I just want to show just this one. That'll be enough. All right. So now, if you actually got not and not over here, they can just be simplified, right? So when I say simplify, I simply meant you can simply, okay, let me just say this. So the whole expression over here is simply just equivalent to not and not can just be discarded. So it will just be is positive. So all of the derivations simply show when I actually get to the else part, implicitly that really mean is positive. You know what? Let me just be very precise over here. Okay, so this means not. Let me just use a different color. Not is positive is such simply false. Equivalently, positive is true. Okay, let me write a little bit better. Right? Hopefully it's not too tricky for you, so I would like you to think about these two. So think about this part over here, and this part over here is really talking about the same thing, meaning that if I can ever get to the else branch over here, so that means not is positive is not the case. Equivalently, so it would be is positive is the case. All right, so we're gonna now trace the code. All right, so now just talk about the code structure. I think to really understand, if you get to the else branch, that simply means whatever branching condition over here is actually false. That's a very important understanding from the previous part of the lecture. So now let's try to trace the program very quickly. Okay, I'm going to use, I just want to do one more thing. I want to visualize very quickly here. You can see radius larger than 0 is actually over here. So you can think about radius larger than 0 is exactly, is exactly this interval over here, right? It does not include 0. And then you can think about this is radius larger than 0. What about the rest, right? So you want to see the rest over here. So the rest will just be over here, right? Including 0. You can think about the rest will be simply not the case, radius larger than 0, or equivalently, it would be radius less than or equal to 0. So remember, when I talk about Boolean type, as said, you should really think about how you can rewrite the relational operation, right? So the relational operation. Now this will be the use case for this, right? So now you want to know about if I want to do selective action at runtime, either the user input is going to fall into this particular range where radius is larger than 0, or the negation of that, which will be this particular range, the pink one. In that case, it will be that radius is less than or equal to 0, in which case we're going to print out some error message over here, right? All right, so now let's now try to trace the code, and then I'll leave that to you to really look a little bit more closely on the code structure. Let's now try to do it. So now the first input will be just 5, all right? 5 over here. So we're going to read in the input value from the user. So let's say radius is simply just 5, right? So now, when I say radius larger than 0, so 5 larger than 0 will be true, okay? And then, now let's try this. If not the case, it is positive, right? So now you can, I would say, okay, let me do it again. So you can see this part here simply evaluate to true. So that means it's positive is going to be true, all right? So now we know that it's positive is the case. So what about its negation? So we basically can think about this case over here is really asking whether the input is invalid, right? So if it is not positive, we're going to print out the error over here. But now should we print out the error? The answer is no, because now you can see apply negation to true. We're going to get false, right? So now this particular branch condition here is going to be false. So which means we're going to bypass this particular body of the execution, right? So now let me just be a little bit careful over here, because we're going to need 3 cases over here. So this is going to be bypassed. And now, so that means it's positive is really the case. And then we're going to print out area is whatever area over here. All right, I'm going to show you on Eclipse as well. So that'll be the first case. Hopefully that's fine. What about if the radius is actually 0? So that'll be the second case. If the radius is simply read in as 0, I'll put 0 over here. So that means now we're going to evaluate radius larger than 0. 0 strictly larger than itself would be false. All right, false. So now we're going to evaluate this. So now when we run evaluate the first branching condition over here, when we evaluate this, we know that it's positive. Let me just say it again. We're going to evaluate this branching condition here. It's positive, is already false. So not false is going to give you true. So that means this particular branching condition for input 0 is going to be true. So that means we're going to execute this particular line over here. So we're going to print out the error for the 0. And then the else part will just be disregarded. All right? All right. Hopefully you're okay. So I got many colors over here. I just want to make sure you know exactly how we execute the same piece of code using different input. It's really important. All right. Final one. What about if the input is simply -3, right? So let's say the user enter -3. So -3 is going to be stored into radius. And then we're going to evaluate this expression over here. Radius larger than 0, -3 larger than 0 will be false. All right. So which means is positive is going to be false in this case. Of course, in the previous case for 0, I didn't put it, but I can put it now. In the previous case, for 0 is also false, right? So now we know that for -3 is positive is going to be false. So now we want to see over here. So when we evaluate this condition over here, is positive, right? So now is positive is already false as we know. And then not false will be true. Similar to the case of 0. So that means we're also going to execute this line for the error message. And then we're going to bypass the else part. All right. So I would suggest really try to write down the code on a piece of paper if you wish, and then really try to manually trace that. So this will be the simplest one. You can really try to practice yourself. All right. All right. So now let's go to Eclipse to show you how you can trace the negation. I'm just going to do maybe two examples together with you. So now if you simply click on logical operation, negation, okay, click on that. And this is the negation example we just did, right? You can see the not is positive. It's a branching condition. And what I will do is I'm going to simply put over here the line, the breakpoint, line number 11. Okay, and I'm going to launch the debugger, right? If you haven't known about how to do this, you should really refer to week number 2 Java tutorial video. Right click on this, and then I would say debug as Java application. And then enter radius value. So let me try the first one. Let's say I simply try number 5. Okay, and then I'm going to switch to debug perspective. All right, so now I'm in the debugging perspective. Let's now get rid of from the previous part of the lecture. I can just get rid of them. All right. So now what expression I want to write to predict. So I am now the execution flow is now right in the beginning of line number 11, right before we try to execute this line. So what I want to do is I want to know what's going to be assigned to is positive. So I will simply do radius larger than 0. I'll put it there, right? I simply put the right hand side over here. So I know that it's going to be assigned to is positive. So now we are right before executing this line. Let's look at the variables over here. If you look at, we don't have the is positive just yet, right? Now if I say step over here, it's now going to assign is positive to just true, right? That's good. So now we're going to run this single if statement here, and now we'll do some similar tracing. What's really the expression over here? You can see, let me go back to expression over here. First of all, is positive is simply assigned to true. What about its negation? I can say exclamation mark is positive is going to be false. So that means this branching condition over here, not is positive, is going to be false. So that means when we say step over, we're going to jump to line number 16, right? We're going to bypass this particular error message branch. So if I say step over, now I got this. And then if I say step over again, it's going to say area is whatever. All right. That will be the first case I would like to trace with you. The second case, let's see. So now I can stop the debugger, and I want to debug right away. So I can click on the debug button here. All right. If I do it again, so now I want to enter a radius value. Why don't I try -3? And then for 0, I'll leave that as an exercise for you. -3, and then so now I'm right in the beginning of line number 11, before I try to execute this line over here. Now, if you go to expressions over here, you can see radius larger than 0 over here, which is, you can see -3. Radius value is actually -3. -3 larger than 0 should be false. So we know that. So now you can see it's positive, it's showing error. It's simply because we're now right in the beginning of line number 11, right before we try to execute this line. That's why it's positive, it's not yet in the context. And also in the variables, it simply doesn't show it's positive just yet. Notice the subtlety over here. So now, as soon as I say step over, it's going to assign its positive to be false, right? As we predicted, right? You can see this expression here is false, and we just assign its positive to be false. And now when we evaluate this, so we want the exclamation mark to be applied. So now you can see this is the expression we wrote before. So its positive is false. Exclamation mark to do its negation will get true. So we predict the entire expression over here is going to be true. So now what should we do? Well, we'll get into this particular branch. So now if I say step over, we are now going to execute the error message over here. And then after that, are we going to execute the else part? No, we're going to bypass the rest. And then go to line number 20. All right, so that's a complete walkthrough together with you. Let me stop it and go back to Java. All right, so that's a complete walkthrough about this example for logical negation. I would say one exercise for you will be, so let me put it down. So we haven't done really radius yet. So this will be some exercise for you. So the exercise will be, let me do it again. So the exercise will be run in debugger. All right. Okay, so that's about the negation. It's not very difficult, but I just want to explain the little bit the trick about the logic over here. We have a negation over here, so now the else part will just be the negation of that for the branching condition. That's the most important insight to really pick up from this particular example. All right, so now let's go on to logical conjunction.